Hi everybody, welcome to today's episode of Office Real Talk with Taz. We are at episode 19 and today's episode is going to be another listener special. This is where I take questions from you and I answer them. So recently I went out on social media and I asked for a bunch of people to submit questions via an anonymous form. So many of you DM'd me and I also looked back at all the DMs I get all the time and found the most common questions to answer for you today. So hopefully this helps those of you out that asked a question, but for those of you that didn't ask a question and might have the same worries, hopefully this answers some of your questions too. Thank you so much for listening so far. Thank you so much for getting to episode 19 with me. Let's get into the Q&A. My name's Taz. I'm a woman. I'm brown. I grew up in Birmingham. I was raised by a single mum on free school meals. I've spent the last few years navigating corporate exec life. And what I've learned over the years is there is a set of corporate rules nobody is saying out loud. And that's why I created this podcast. This space is for us to unpack those rules and to help you figure out how you want to navigate the system and engage with it. I would love for you to follow on Office Real Talk on Instagram or TikTok and subscribe on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts so we can get more of us listening and winning in the corporate world. Let's get into it. Question 1. My role might disappear in a restructure. What do I do while I'm waiting? And the context to this one is my team is likely to merge with another team and there may be only one manager role left. I think my counterpart will probably get that role. Nothing has officially happened yet, but I'm stuck in limbo. The job market feels impossible and I'm a breadwinner of the family with a young child. What should I be doing now? God, that's a really difficult situation. So firstly, if you are the person who asked this question, I recognise that is a really difficult situation and I'm sorry you're in it. What I will say is this is a really common situation that is happening now more and more in the workplace. And more people are facing redundancy and more people need to understand how to navigate it. But ultimately, to answer your question, while you're in limbo, don't do nothing. So remember my rule, action cures anxiety. And if you're going to sit there and do nothing, you are going to feel even more actions. Now, the thing is, if you think that your counterpart is going to get the role, I could sit here and say, what evidence do you have of that? Why do you think that? And they would be very valid things to say to you. And there's probably something in that. You might be worrying about something that's not going to happen and you might be the one who gets the role. But there is also a high possibility that you might not. And you know your situation, you know your organisation and your counterpart better than that. Doing nothing is not an option because nothing changes if nothing changes. So the first thing I would say is acknowledging that the job market does feel impossible. I get that it feels like that and I know so many people who have struggled in it. But I also know so many people who are getting job offers, who are being approached by recruiters and who are succeeding in getting roles in this job market. Do not sit there and spiral. Get your CV ready and make sure it's something that can be translated externally into what jobs might be out there in the market. Now, what do I mean by that? If you are, for example, a project manager and everything on your CV says project manager on it and all the roles you are looking for and looking at and searching for on LinkedIn, on Indeed, or wherever you search or talking to people about are project manager roles, you are limiting yourself. And I see this so much with people who face redundancy. They're like, the job I do is not available somewhere else. The job I do in this organisation doesn't exist somewhere else. Maybe. But if you're a project manager, you've got dynamic skills. And most of us that do any job have skills that can be translated to another job. So if you're a project manager, that means you can do change management. If you're a project manager, that means you can solve complex problems. If you're a project manager, you can probably do a bunch of process mapping. If you're a project manager, you might be good with technical change. That means you could probably go and do a BA job. A business analyst. You might be able to do a Scrum Master job if you've done project management in agile workplaces. You might have been a project manager who leads another team of project managers. So you might go and do a team leader job in a customer services organization. What happens is people box themselves in really tightly to this is the job title and I've done it like this for so many years. The other thing with so many people who face redundancy in the main is that they've been in their organisations a long time. So they don't really know how it works outside of their organisation. So what you need to get comfortable doing is talking about yourself in dynamic terms. Look at what jobs exist out there. Look at the skills that you've got and write down the skills that you've got that are transferable, that don't matter regardless of the specificity of the job you do today. And the biggest thing, if your LinkedIn isn't updated, you are kind of bringing this on yourself. Go and have a look at your LinkedIn. Does the top of it, next to your name, you've got that kind of little bio. Does it say project manager? If it does, delete that. You are not your job title. Write down things like change specialist, transformation, tech, leadership. Start bringing out those dynamic keywords. Make sure your bio is written in a way that is transferable. Get people to endorse you who work in the organisation that you're in now or that you've worked with before. And it doesn't mean a role inside your organisation is off the table. Go and talk to people you know. Go and talk to sponsors. They might have opportunities for you that you don't know about. I'm not saying it won't be difficult, but doing nothing is not an option. You have to start learning to talk about yourself and your impact differently. Make yourself appear dynamic. Make yourself presentable in a way that is not rigid, and let your CV and your LinkedIn do the hard work for you. Reach out to recruiters, apply for jobs, but actively do things that are gonna help cure the anxiety and make a plan. I'm not saying you'll get a job tomorrow, but they are your options. I hope that helps. I'm sorry it's a difficult situation, and I think that this is a really important one where you have to almost take control of the situation. You can't change what's happening. It is going to happen more and more in the industry. It happens to most people. How you show up and navigate that for yourself is the only change you can make. Okay, question 2. How do you set boundaries early in your career when everyone else is working 16-hour days? 16 hours. Can't even remember the last time I did that. So what's the context on that? I'm junior and I work in consulting. Okay, that tells me everything I need to know already. Everyone around me works ridiculous hours, so I feel like I have to do the same to prove myself. Can I set boundaries? And if so, how do I set them when I don't have any credibility to push back? And I'm worried that it will make me look like I'm not ambitious enough. Unpopular opinion, this is what happens in consulting. I've got so many friends that have worked in consulting, and I also have worked with loads of consultants across my career. And the biggest thing that I have evidenced is that they work all the hours God sends. And that is because they are on fixed term contracts with a client where they need to deliver a bunch of things within that period to get things out of the line. So I'm working with some consultants at the moment, right? And they will say to me, I'm not around between 3 and 6 because I've got some meetings, but I will log on this evening and send you something by 9 o'clock. I'm not looking at it at 9 o'clock. Are you? And I think that that is a culture that's innate in consultancies. And if you are a consultant, that is going to be what's happening around you. So I get that is a very different culture to a lot of corporate places. What I will say though, if you start out working 16 hours a day, you are going to burn out. And you're probably not going to realize it because you'll be running on fumes. The people I know who have worked in consultancies have worked those kind of hours and it catches up with them. You're not eating properly. You're probably eating takeaways at the office. You're not sleeping much. You're going out for drinks after. You're doing the whole rat racing, right? That's going to catch up with you. In a consultancy, there will be times when you have to put in the hours when there's a big client deliverable. I'm not going to say that that's not going to happen. But if it is a consistent thing, you are going to have to think about whether that's sustainable for you. What I would say is there's a couple of things to consider. Are people around you working those hours to show face, or are they being productive in the hours that they're working? If there is a deadline and you're all working on a deck, a presentation, a report, I get that. But if people are in the office because other people are in the office, that sometimes can become like a behavior breeds behavior environment, and you don't need to participate in that. So get very clear on what your deliverables are. Are you delivering them? And if people are there to show face, decide to opt out of that. That is not going to hurt your career options if it's not impacting your work. What I will say, though, is when people are working on a deadline, when there is more value you can be adding, if you are visible, if you are if you are participating, that does help. I'm not saying it's right, but you've chosen to work in consulting where that is an expectation. The other thing I will say, though, is long term, if it's 16 hours now, it might be 16 hours for the next 5 or 10 years because you are setting a precedent on how you work. And that is not a sustainable way to live because you are basically living to work rather than working to live. I'm not really sure when you're going to enjoy this consultancy money that you're making. So you need to think about, is this something that you want in 5 years' time? And right now, you might. Your boundaries are yours to put in place. You might not be able to put them in place every single day of the week, but there might be days of the week where you're like, I'm going to go to the gym before work. I'm not going to work till 7 o'clock tonight. At 6 o'clock, I'm going to leave the office. I'm going to go out for dinner. Yes, I know on Thursday, we're going to be working till 9 o'clock in the office because we've got a client report. Yes, there might be periods when you're doing client work where it's a 6-week engagement and it is going to be horrifically busy and you're going to be in the office till 9 every night. Those weeks or those projects, you might want to put boundaries in place that feel different, which is about how you spend time with your family, how you use your weekends, making sure you get out for lunch, making sure you go for a walk. Whatever that looks like, you are going to have to find that balance. I'm not going to sit here and say to you, put in those boundaries and only do a 9 to 5. That doesn't work in consultancy if that's what you've chosen and that's where you want to get on. But I'm also not going to say to you, work every hour God sends until midnight and make sure that you are showing face to your partners and the directors in the firm. I've seen people do that and they didn't get the promotions, they didn't get the pay rises, they didn't get all the promises they were made. And at the end of it, they were just burnt out. The biggest thing to take from this, and I was talking about this morning with my husband actually, when you are starting out in your career, you sometimes have to do what you have to do to get to where you want to. But I definitely wish I had some boundaries in place at that time for my sleep, for my eating, for my health, for the people around me. And once you lose all of that, it's really hard to get it back later on. So make sure you are prioritizing yourself and your health and be okay with the choice that you make. That consulting is going to expect this from you, but you can try and claim some power back and do it on your terms. I hope that helps. I hope you're kind to yourself. And more importantly, I hope that you realize that having boundaries doesn't mean you're a failure. Doing the hard work doesn't mean you're necessarily going to be successful. There is a balance and a nuance to all of that. And that's what being in work is. That's what careers mean. You have to find that for yourself and know what that is. And only you will know your limits and what you tolerate. All right, question number 3. I know I'm ready for a new role, but I'm terrified of leaving. So what's the context on this one? I've been at the same organization for a long time. I know I need to move to progress, but I'm scared. I'm scared I'll leave somewhere comfortable and end up somewhere worse. How do you know when it's time to take the risk? You know, right? Because you're saying you're ready to leave. You're saying you're not going to progress where you are, so you need to leave to make that happen. You will know. And I've talked about this on the podcast before. You know when you're done with the work, you feel like you can't grow anymore, you like the work, you like the people, but you know you can do more. The opportunities aren't where you are, so you're wondering if you can go where they are, and so that's time to leave. Now, what I will say, if you've worked in an organization for a long time, it is very easy to get institutionalized. And someone recently DM'd me talking about that word, and I haven't heard it for such a long time, but you can get institutionalized. And what that means is you basically assume that everything that happens around you in the organization is just how everything happens in the world of work. That is not true. And as someone who's moved organizations 5 times, every organization is same but different. They all have some things that are similar and they all have things that are different. But that's the excitement of starting out. So if you believe there is only one way to do things because you've been in the organization a long time, the only way to find out is to do the damn thing. Now, what I will say is it is so natural if you've worked in one place for a long time to feel secure. But it's also very natural to assume the worst of where you might go. And a lot of people go, well, I've heard some horror stories. I was talking to this guy recently and he was like, yeah, I did see some jobs externally, but I've heard some horror stories that the culture's really bad there. There will be horror stories about the organizations that you work in now that you don't know. They might not be your stories, but there might be other people's stories. 2 people can work in the same environment and have completely different experiences. So just remember, someone's horror story could be someone else's success story. That's the first thing to figure out. Also, everyone's experiences aren't your experiences. Just because someone's had a bad day at work doesn't mean your day at work was bad. 2 people can go to the same secondary school and one person could have got bullied and the other one could have thrived and been popular. That's just life. And remember what I always say, life and work are very much the same. We just overcomplicate them. It's anxiety that is making you think this could be worse. And if you always believe that, but you know you need to move, you are going to feel very stuck because you're going to think, I know I need to move, but it could be worse over there. Nothing's getting better here. Yeah, all you're doing is staying, so you're going to keep yourself stuck. If you want to unstick yourself, you're going to have to take the shot. You're going to have to do the damn thing. And what I mean by that is you will not find out if that culture is worse or better until you move. Now, that might feel scary to you. That might feel like too big a risk to take. That is your choice and only you can make that. But what I will say is you can ask questions to understand the culture. You can do research. So here's a few practical things you can do to find out about the culture you're going into and the environment. The first thing is make sure you're really, really clear about what the job is. You won't know everything before you get into the organization, and jobs do feel different. And that happens a lot, especially the more senior you get. But find out what the job is. Look at the job description. Check that you understand it. And when you are in an interview, if you get an interview, ask questions about it. Remember, interviews are not there just for them to figure out if you're for them. You're also trying to figure out if they're for you. You are trying to figure out if that is somewhere you want to work. So ask questions about the job. The second thing you can do is check reviews out at Glassdoor. So if you haven't heard of Glassdoor, it's a company, a website, which you can basically browse and put in a company name and understand what it's about. And people will talk about what it's like to work there. They'll talk about the culture. They'll talk about the flexibility. They'll talk about the perks. They'll talk about the benefits, whatever. Now, again, it's worth taking that with a pinch of salt because sometimes it's really accurate. Sometimes it's not. There are organizations on there which I've heard horror stories about and people are like, yeah, I love it. I love it. I love it. Because some organizations will go on a campaign to make sure their Glassdoor ratings look really good. So you have to take that with a pinch of salt, but it is worth using it as a data point. The other data point you can get as well is looking on LinkedIn. Do you know people who work there? Have you met people who work there? Is there someone in your network that's worked there? Could you message some people to say, you know, I'm looking to apply for a job there. I wondered what it was like to work there. I know people who do that a lot and people do reply and share with you. But you've got to do it with more than one or two people, right? To really get a feel for it. So get your data points before you join. And then the third thing is in the interview. You are going to get asked if you've got any questions. The worst question you can ask is, what's the next step of the process? You should definitely ask that. But asking questions like, how would people describe the culture here? What are the values of the organization? When's the last time someone got promoted internally? How do you guys ensure that you've got an inclusive workplace? Those kind of questions are really, really important. And there's loads and loads more that I can share around questions to ask in an interview. I've got that somewhere, so I will dig it out and post it on socials at some point. But I think that that is really, really important to go in. Like, you are going in to showcase the best of yourself, but you're also expecting them to showcase the best of their self. And if you walk away with a feeling that this is not for me, you don't have to take the job. You don't have to take the job. There are conversations I've had with organizations where I've got a feel for the job is not what I want it to be. Or there is a dynamic in the leadership team that I don't think is very clear around people's accountabilities. And I've decided I'm not going to progress. I've told recruiters, organizations, it just feels like you guys aren't clear on what the remits are. It feels like it's not set up well. Therefore, this isn't for me. And you can walk away from stuff. And that's just not a senior thing. That's at any level. You are not committed to taking a job because you've applied or you've gone for an interview. So that's really important to know. I hope that helps. And I will do a bunch of posts around kind of interviews and stuff like that because it comes up time and time again. And I recognise that's something we need to talk about. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. But I hope that's helpful. Next question. I didn't negotiate enough money when I joined. Is it too late? Simple answer, no. It's not too late. But if you just joined yesterday, it might be. So there's a bit of context there. If you just joined an organisation or got a new job and you didn't negotiate enough money and now you found out by talking to the guy next to you or by overhearing things or, I don't know, you've had a mid-year review and you've been told, you know, there's no pay rises coming for the next 12, 18 months or whatever, and you're feeling like, actually, I should ask for more. The only way you're going to find out is by asking. It's never too late. There aren't fixed times to ask for pay rises. Whilst companies do have fixed times that they might allocate them naturally, i.e. there's a cycle when they will do pay reviews independently as part of a process, you can still ask at any time. And I think that's really, really important to know. You can ask at any time. So it's about putting your case together. There's an episode I did all the way back when around money mindset and how you kind of negotiate and how you figure out what to ask for. Go back and listen to that. That should be helpful. But I think the main thing I would say to you is if you want to ask for more money, there is no fixed time to do that. If you think you are worth more than you are getting paid today, ask for what you want. Remember, you can put together a case, and that case should include a few things. Why you feel like you deserve more money. So it could be based on your performance. You're performing really, really well. You've got all the data points to evidence that, and you're going to put that forward as part of your case. If you're underperforming, don't bother. Being good at your job is the bare minimum. Make sure you have the data to back it up and you're hitting your goals. The second thing, have your number ready. What are you looking for? And why are you looking for that? You don't need to tell them why you're looking for that, but you need to know. Is that your number because you found out Bob next to you earns that much? Or is that the number you need to pay your bills? Or is that the number that you've seen an external job offers? Make sure you know that reason at the back of your head because it's important to articulate that in the context of the request. So you could say something like, having come across information about what the rest of the team are getting and looking at where I'm at and based on my experience and my performance, which is blah, 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 I'd like to request a pay rise of X. Can we discuss? But you need to have a number ready because they might go, okay, well, I can give you $2,000 more. And you might say, well, actually, I was looking for something in the range of whatever. There is no bad time to ask apart from when you are underperforming. Make sure you've got your data points, make sure you know why you're asking, and make sure you know what your number is. If you don't get it, you've got a choice to make. But let me tell you one thing. The best time to ask is when you get a new job or you're joining a new organization. That is when you have the most leverage. That is when those conversations are expected. And people, managers, organizations expect expect you to negotiate. They don't expect you to say, sure, that's a great offer, I'll just take it. Unless that offer is you're getting 100 grand more. Do you know what I mean? I hope that helps. All right. My boss is leaving and I'm losing my sponsor. I'm really worried. So my boss is one of the main reasons I took this job. They've backed me, they've opened doors for me and advocated for me. Now they're leaving and I feel like I'm losing both my boss and my sponsor. How do I protect my career when the person backing me leaves? Been there more times than I would care to talk about. I was out with one of my old bosses last night, actually, and I said to him, I joined the organisation for you and now you've left and, you know, whatever else. What I will say is it's not all doom and gloom, firstly. Sometimes your boss leaves and they're your sponsor and it's sad and they go, but your next boss might be even better. They might be someone that you work with really well. They could sponsor you on a whole nother level. That has happened to me. I assumed the worst and got the best. So don't spiral into negativity. That's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is don't put all your eggs in one basket ever. Never attach yourself or your career to a person. Make sure you have enough other sponsors around you. And if your boss was that good and they were that amazing of a sponsor, they would have made sure that you had visibility. They would have been talking about your name in rooms that you're not in. They would have found other people who know how good you are and told them about it. So make sure you've got other sponsors who you can talk to. And the last thing is make sure that your work as you continue is visible. Make sure you are communicating your impact. Make sure there is visibility around what you're doing and make sure people see it. So they don't think that you were just good because of your old boss. They know that you are good in your own right and that other people can advocate for you because you are still delivering value. But you have to be able to advocate for yourself. That is the number one skill that we're not taught. Self-advocacy is really important and you're going to have to get really comfortable doing that more and more if your main sponsor has left. What I will say is when your boss leaves and your sponsor leaves, you are allowed to be upset about it. That's like totally natural at work. It's like going through a breakup, right? It can be if you love the person that you work for. And I've been there and it was really sad. Like a couple of times I've been there. What you have to figure out, though, is if you want to follow your boss, they might have an opportunity for you somewhere else you want to go. That's something to consider. That's happened to me before. You might, love your next boss. You might not. Who you work for is a really, really important thing. And if your boss isn't sponsoring you, I honestly believe you need to find a new boss because it's really important your boss does sponsor you. But just remember, the biggest impact I see on people's work, the biggest thing people talk to me about, the biggest thing people always share with me is how their manager impacts them. And that is my own personal opinion too. Your manager has a really big impact on your mental health and how you feel. So it might be great, it might not be, but remember you've got choice and agency. Make sure you leverage your other sponsors, make sure your work is visible, and make sure that you take action. You have options. One person leaving doesn't break your career. It definitely hasn't broken mine, and I've had some of the best bosses and sponsors over my career. Good luck. Okay, that is all questions, I think, answered. Thank you very, very much for listening to Office Real Talk with Taz today. We've done 19 episodes. From episode 20, things are going to sound and look a little bit different because we're going to mix it up a bit and we're going to really get into some interesting topics. Thank you so much for being on the journey with me so far. If you are not following, if you have not subscribed, if you are not engaging in the comments, please do so. It really, really helps reach. It really helps the podcast get to more people. And if you love it and you really like what I talk about and you find it helpful and useful, please tell people about it. Tell your friends. The more people we can get listening to this, the more people we can help. And that's really going to help people like us, underrepresented communities, win in corporate, which is exactly what the mission is of Office Real Talk. See you next time. Bye.